Car Seat Headrest are a band I've been listening to quite a bit over the last 10 years, but it's been 5 years since their last album, Making a Door Less Open. Today we're going to look at the Scholars, and Making a Door Less Open was very commercial. It probably didn't hit the spot. I think COVID had a lot to do with that. This album here feels like it's going back in some ways to the old days, the very indie days, but safe to say that there is a band effort going on here. Al, to begin with, do you think this album is going to bring in new fans of the band?
That's a great question, mate. Look, it's been 5 years since their last album, and I'm excited, mate. You're a massive, massive Car Seat Headrest fan. Let's just get that out there. And I didn't know what to kind of expect. When I kind of heard on the radar that we were going to look at a rock opera, I was pretty skeptical because here on Indie Miners, we have reviewed the Smashing Pumpkins rock opera Autumn, which we weren't massive fans of. Feel free to have a look at the video here. So I didn't know what to expect. I guess I set myself a challenge here to see whether they were able to execute a, standalone rock opera album, as well as some, radio-friendly singles for the more casual listener. Let's deep dive into what you were really hoping for, mate, because I know you're a massive fan.
I am, and I had the same skepticism, right? Because I know that you can really muck these rock operas up. They
Absolutely.
can get really campy. The lyrics and the story take over the actual songwriting. There's a lot that can go wrong. Now, I think we heard Gethsemane, which is the first single, and I think we were put at ease somewhat. And we know that also Will Toledo is actually quite a good storyteller. So Twin Fantasy, for fans of Car Seat Headrest, is probably the most celebrated of all of his concept albums. So they've got quite a few. I mean, you could almost argue that most of the albums are concept albums in a lot of ways. But yeah, so a little bit apprehensive, but in terms of the listening of the album and what you get, I mean, firstly, I think that he does nail the brief. So if you are looking at the lyrics and looking at the story, you're seeing that, it's telling this story of, about someone who's trying to reflect on their past. So you have that story that is being told throughout the songs, but it's not getting in the way of the music.
And I mean, he's had 5 years to kind of, contemplate this album, hasn't he? Because he went through a pretty decent health scare there with COVID or long COVID, whatever he had. So it's a real introspective kind of time for Will and the band. And I believe that it's not just Will kind of writing on this album. Is that right?
No, that's right. So I mean, this album might not have ever happened because of Will's health issues. So, and I think also what's there to reflect on here is that when Car Seat Headrest first came about, it was just Will Toledo. That was just him. He was just the one. 10 years ago with Teens of Style, he brought the other band members on, but it was more or less his vehicle. What's different now compared to 10 years ago is that you're certainly hearing the other band members' influences in the music. So they're all now participating in the songwriting, and it's very clear that they're having a little bit of a say in things, which is making the album a little bit more interesting, or at the very least different to a lot of the albums that people were used to back 10 years ago. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, I'll say this, Al, it is a very dense and polarizing album. So I think that 70 minutes in length there's 9 songs. 4 of those songs are over 8 minutes. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. He can write these long songs, but you can go from the indie freakouts to the introspection to the swirling keyboards into something a little bit more fancy from maybe synth keyboards as well. And this could all happen in the one song. So I think to the casual fan out there, I'm always, interested to know if this is the type of album. Is this the entry point for someone who is potentially going to be a future Car Seat Headrest fan?
And I'd have to put myself in that position as the casual listener. Massive fan of Killer Whale from years ago. That was an absolute belter of a song. And there's, for the casual listener like myself, you're going to find some absolute gems in this album, whether you're after a full cohesive album or not. It starts off with the track CCF, I'm Gonna Stay With You. Mate, this is probably my song of the year. I think this is an absolute cracker of a song, and it's easily probably the best opener of any album I've heard of this year. And I reckon the first 4 tracks are absolutely sensational. Now, when you're talking about polarizing, I reckon this is where you and I might have different positions, because I'm actually not a massive fan of the 19-minute epic Planet Destruction. A lot of reviews, which I kind of read, were saying, skip the rest, get to this song. And I'm just like, yeah, it's okay, but I reckon there's better tracks off this, mate. What are your, where are you on the highlights of the album?
That's interesting you're saying that, because I love the song. I actually am going back to the song. The problem with it, it's you got to listen to 50 minutes of the album before you get to that song.
Yeah, right.
So that's, but I wouldn't say that there's a bad song on it, but like I think it's just the volume, right? Like so Planet Destruction. There's a lot going on. There's almost this sort of spoken word poetry, almost bordering on, and it's going back and forth, and you're hearing a blitzkrieg of guitars at some point. Like it's a really cool song, but I could see that if you're not into Car Seat Headrest, that you might not be really wanting to hear that, and especially so deep into the album. Like you're probably over it by 50 minutes, right? But then there's I really like the last song, True False Lover.
Yeah, that's why didn't they put that further up the album? I mean, that's
well, that's interesting. It's like a fun song. So they do these really kind of deeper songs, but then they do some fun songs as well, which is why I like Car Seat Headrest albums, because they just, there is a lot for everyone. But I think if, again, it comes back to maybe the more casual listener, the more mainstream listener, I can see that I don't think that it's going to connect with that type of audience. What I put this in the category of is prog indie, right?
Yeah, okay.
So prog indie is, I think that they're the best prog indie band in the world, but I don't think there's an audience for prog indie, right? Like, I think the whole point of indie was almost
there was 20 years ago.
reaction to. Well, put it this way. Like, I think that indie music at its core, alternative music at its core, was slightly a reaction to classic rock, to prog rock. So even sort of, if you think about punk in the 70s, it was a reaction against the Pink Floyds. Now, Car Seat Headrest sort of have changed that narrative and are doing indie things in a prog type of way, as in it's you've got these verbose songs. So I love it, but I think that the market for it, I think, is very limited. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely think they've executed this far better than what the Pumpkins have done. And they're not the only band kind of out there doing this. I mean, Lord Huron, who are about to release a new album, they're kind of doing the same kind of thing, but what they were able to do was release real killer radio-friendly tracks, where Car Seat Headrest have kind of done this, but they just don't have the market for it, in my opinion. I think there's a real passionate following for this particular band, and it'll be interesting to see whether they tour with this album and play it kind of start to finish, or whether they just kind of cherry pick songs for their live list, mate. But I'm hearing kind of references in terms of almost kind of Brian Wilson at different points.
Absolutely. So I mean, I'm hearing The Wall. So from Pink Floyd, The Wall. Just in terms of the way he's put together a narrative. Almost like Tusk by Fleetwood Mac. So it's almost messy, dense, very polarizing, but like they haven't got a Rumours. They've never done a Rumours. Like they've never done an album that was sort of really, really popular to begin with. So there is lots of references like that, and it's really strange to almost talk about those 3 albums, if you want to include Pet Sounds, and say that, well, there is sort of some form of a homage to all 3. So then that, again, it just what makes the band really, really interesting to listen to if you're into it. So, look, for me, I think this is going to, and I think it was always going to be a front runner for me to be a sort of an album of the year contender. So I am going to give this 4 out of 5 at the moment. We've probably room to grow. Al, I'm not sure if that's in your areas or you're sort of rating it a little bit more conservatively.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3.5. I think there's a little bit more room to grow, but let's put it out there. I mean, Will Toledo is an absolute genius, and obviously this is a team effort album. But I mean, I'd love to know the workings in this guy's head. He's a genius. Like, I mean, some of
Yes.
the lyrics that he comes up with, and I'm not even going to attempt to kind of deep dive into the lyrics. I think it's a start to finish brilliant album, mate. I'm going to go 3.5.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know what you think. How do you rate this album compared to other albums? I think that there are similar albums out there in Car Seat Headrest's back catalogue, but I think there is certainly a difference now with the band playing as a band as opposed to being almost like a Will Toledo solo project. Let us know what you're thinking. I'd love to hear your thoughts.